Assalamu alaikum everyone, how are you? I hope that you're staying home, that you're staying safe. I hope that you're faring well in quarantine. Today, inshallah, we are going to continue our SAT reading tips and tricks series. Okay? Now, I want to make something very clear. This lesson depends on the information that was said in the previous video in the series. So, if you didn't watch the previous video yet, which is, let me write the name here, SAT reading tips and tricks part 1, please watch it now. Please pause this video, go watch the previous video, and then come back to watch this one, since what is said in this video is a continuation of the previous video. Okay, you have to watch the previous video first. Okay, now I will pause for a moment if you want to go watch the other video. Okay, moment's over. So before we actually begin this video, I want to revise a little bit on the strategy that we learned together in the last video, since we're going to combine it with another strategy in this video to make the new result. Okay, so what we said last time was that simply is a strategy known as in other words. It simply states that the answer in citation questions, these are questions that in which you are given a certain citation or line reference. So this rule states that the answer in line reference questions is generally what was said in the lines, in this case what was said here. Now the most important word is in other words. Okay, so this was the rule that we explained last time, that the line reference, the things that were said in the lines, are simply a restatement of what was said, in the lines. Okay, that the answer is a restatement of what was said in the lines. Now, we're not going to solve this question now. We solved it in the previous video already, but I will remind you simply of what we said. We said that in this case, the answer is going to be, okay, to be D, sorry, okay? So we said the line reference says, many relish the opportunity to buy presents because gift giving offers a powerful means to build stronger bonds with one's closest peers. Now, if you look closely, to build stronger bonds, isn't it the same as strengthen? Don't they have the same meaning? Right? So the answer was simply a restatement, or a restatement of what was said in the quotation or in the lines, in other words. Right? And with one's, or we can say the bonds and with one's closest peers, simply refer to it being a relationship. Okay? So this is so this functions as a quick revision of what we took in the previous video. Again, if you don't remember this, if you think that you want to revise again, I would strongly advise that you watch the previous video. It's like about 8 minutes or something, and then come back for this one. Okay, now we want to move on now to what we're going to take in this session together. And what we're going to take is these paired questions. Okay, so this type of question is very common in the SAT. In fact, you will find about 4 questions in every passage. Approximately, you will find 4 questions per passage that come in this format. Okay, what is this format? Simply that you're asked a question, and after being asked the question, you have to find the best evidence that supports that answer. Okay, that supports your answer for the first question. Now, a lot of SAT students actually approach this kind of questions in what I wouldn't actually recommend. I wouldn't recommend the way that most people use. Now, what I would recommend, or how should we solve these questions? We use what I like to call the 3-step method. Okay, so what is the 3-step method to solve paired questions? which are, like we said, questions where you're asked a question and then you're asked to find the best evidence for that question. Now, the three-step method contains step number 1 is that you should read the question. You should read this part and understand what the question is asking about. Read the question. Understand what it is asking about. Okay? Now, the thing is that you're going to do now is that now a lot of students make the mistake of trying to answer the question first. Don't do this. Step number 1 is that you only read the question, and after step number 1, you actually move to the next question. Sorry. You actually move to the next question. Okay? So step number 2 is that search for the answer in the evidences. Okay? So what we're going to do is that we are going to search for the answer to this question through these evidences. We're going to take them one by one and search in them for the answer to our question. Okay? Or which evidence answers the question. Now, after finding that evidence, we move on to step number 3. And please pay close attention to this. Let's say, for example, that the answer is evidence A. We're going to take evidence A and use the evidence to find the answer. Okay, to find the answer here. So, let me restate what we did. I know this part can be a little bit confusing, so I would actually recommend that you pause and you think about it again. But let me restate now what we did. Step number 1 is to read the question. Step number 2 is that you search for the correct evidence. And step number 3 is that you use the evidence to answer the question. So 1, then 2, then 3. Okay? You read the question. Then, in step 2, you search for the correct evidence. And in step 3, you search for the answer using the evidence. Okay? Now, let's apply this strategy together. Now, what we'll do in the next slide is that you will find, before we move on to the next slide, you will find that the question here is stated above. But for the sake of making things easier, now, like we said, this is step number 1, which is that we will read the question. Now, we will ignore this part completely. This part will be ignored since, like we said, first we want to find the correct evidence first. So in the next slide, you will find that the evidences are stated next to each other. Okay? We are going to use the question to find the correct evidence, and after it, we will return and solve the question. Okay? Now let's apply what we just learned here. Okay? So first we want to read the question. Now what you do is that when you read the question, number 1, search for keywords. Number 2, try to identify what the question is asking you about. Okay? So first, let's start reading. The authors indicate that people value gift giving because they feel it. Now, what words can we say appear to be important or special? I think the word gift giving seems very important. Now, let's try to identify what the question is asking us about. The authors indicate that people value gift giving because they feel it. What is the what is the question asking me about? The question is asking me, why do people value gift giving? Right? Isn't this what the question is asking me about? Okay, now what you are going to do is that we are going to go to each of these evidences and search for either or both of these portions. So either the answer contains the keywords, or the answer or the evidence answers my question. Okay? In this case, tells us, why do people value gift giving? Okay? Let's begin. This frequent experience of gift giving can engender ambivalent feelings in gift givers. Many relish the opportunity to buy gifts because gift giving offers a powerful means to build stronger bonds with one's closest peers. Now, let's apply this on this answer. Does the answer contain the keywords? Well, it does talk about gift giving in 2 instances, so the answer applies the keywords that we just learned. Now, does the answer identify what the question is asking us about? Well, our question was, why do people value gift giving? Right? And the answer here tells me that people value gift giving because it offers a powerful means to build stronger bonds with one's peers. So why do people value gift giving? Since it builds stronger bonds. So it both answers my other part. And therefore, this evidence is the correct evidence. Okay? Now, since we identified it as the correct evidence, let's put it beside the question and solve. Now, this is the same question that I gave you previously, actually. So, the next step, which is step number 3, is that we're going to use this evidence to solve the question. And like we explained from a little bit and in the previous video, the answer in this case will be D. Okay? Now, let's apply this on another question. Why does Akira say his meeting with Chi is a matter of urgency? Why does he say that it's important? Why does he say that it's urgent? Okay, so the steps that we're going to do are the same that we did in the previous question. Number 1, we will read the question. Number 2, we will use it to find the best evidence. And after finding the evidence, step number 3 is that we will use this evidence to answer the question. Okay? So what we did here was the same as in the last question. So we will do for the same thing. We will identify keywords and we will try to find the question or know what is the question asking us about. Okay? So, why does Akira say his meeting with Chi is a matter of urgency? So the keywords that I can get here, now everyone can identify their own keywords, but I think the thing that stands out the most to me is that we said it's a matter of urgency. It's important. It has to occur now, right? So this is my keywords. Here I would say urgency. Now, what is the question? Actually, in this case, they sort of laid the question out for us. Simply, why does Akira say that his meeting with Chi is a matter of urgency? Why does he think it is urgent? Meeting Chi is urgent, right? Why does he say that it's urgent? Now, I want to make something very clear. Unfortunately, I misquoted the answer here, so this part is not part of the answer. Okay? And this part. Okay. Now let's look at the first one. It simply says, I don't want to trouble you. Does this contain the keywords? No. Does this answer my question on why it was urgent and really important that he meet Chi? No. So the first quote, or the first evidence, is 100% incorrect. Okay, the first evidence is 100% incorrect. Now, let's look at the second evidence. Normally, I would approach you more properly, but I've received word of opposition. I have an opportunity to go to America as dentist for Seattle's Japanese community. Now, this answer actually talks about urgency, since he said that he would usually approach her more properly. Okay? However, let's act as if it doesn't contain the keywords. Does it answer my question? Does it tell me why does Akira think the meeting is urgent? Yes. This time, this quote actually answers the question. It tells me that he thinks that it's urgent because he has received word that he has an opportunity to go to America as dentist for Seattle's Japanese community. Okay? So now we will take the same quote and we will use it like we did in the previous question to answer. Remember, the answer is the question in other words. Right? I don't want to trouble you. Normally I would approach you more properly, but I've received word of opposition. I have an opportunity to go to America as dentist for Seattle's Japanese community. Now, if you remember, we actually solved this question together in the last video. But let's try to solve it together now. He fears that his own parents will disapprove of Naomi. He worries that Naomi will reject him and marry someone else. He has been offered an attractive job in another country. He knows that she is unaware of his feelings for Naomi. Now, the answer is clearly C. Why? Since he has been offered an attractive job, which is that he will work as a dentist, right? So dentist is the translation for the attractive job, like we said in the previous video. And that job is in another country, which is America. As you see, the answer is simply a restatement, or in other words, the same thing that was said in the quotation. Okay? Let's take one final example. The narrator indicates that many explorers seeking the North Pole have. You will do the same 3 steps. Number 1, you will read the question. Number 2, you will search for the evidence. And number 3, you will use them in order to answer the question itself. Right? So let's do these 3 steps. The narrator indicates that many previous explorers seeking the North Pole have. Number 1, let's identify words that appear important to us. So for example, I think that many previous explorers is important. Seeking the North Pole is important, right? Now, number 2, let's try to ask ourselves, what is the question asking from me? Okay? The narrator seeks or indicates that many previous explorers seeking the North Pole have. So, the question is asking me what happened to the previous explorers seeking the North Pole, right? Let's look at the first question. Now, I unfortunately misquoted this question also, so the quote is usually only this part. Nobody has succeeded in this thing, and many have died. Are there any keywords mentioned here? We can say that nobody refers to the previous explorers, but I understand that not all people will get it from the keywords. So let's try the second approach. Let's try to use the question. What is the question asking me? The question asked me, what happened to the previous explorers seeking the North Pole? Now, this quote answers that. It tells me that many have died, that the previous explorers have died. Okay? So, this is probably the correct evidence. Let's use it to answer the question. Nobody has succeeded in this thing, and many have died. The narrator indicates that many previous explorers seeking the North Pole have perished in the attempt. Now, what does the word perished mean? Let me tell you that perished means died. So you will find that this answer is a direct restatement of what was said in the quote, right? And therefore, it is the correct answer. This has been our time together. I hope that you understood. If you have any questions, feel free to say them in the comments, and I will answer them, inshallah. Thank you for your time.